Welcome to the Physician's Guide to Financial Wellness, the podcast dedicated to helping physicians in Michigan turn their professional success into financial success while enjoying life along the way. And now, here are your hosts, Andrew Mushbaugh and Trent DeBruin.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Physician's Guide to Financial Wellness. This is Trent DeBruin, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Andrew Mushbaugh. And as we head toward open enrollment season, which is usually late October or early November, depending on the employer, we wanted to take some time to talk about one of our favorite employee benefits, which is a health savings account, or HSA.
Oh, I thought you were going to say an on-site chef with pre-catered meals.
Well, I love the idea of it, although not sure how great that'd be for MDWM's bottom line, especially since it's just the two of us. Maybe you've been spending a little bit too much time with our brother-in-law who works for Google.
That's probably true. We'll have to add it to the 2024 list.
For sure. Now, we should start by mentioning that, just like an on-site chef with free catered meals, an HSA isn't available to everyone. Some employers offer it and some don't. But for those who do have it as an option, it's something we love to take advantage of as part of an overall financial plan. And while we've touched on an HSA in various episodes in the past, we haven't gone in depth, so today we want to do that deeper dive. So what we'll do is start by giving an overview of what an HSA is, talk about some of the tax benefits, explain the investment aspect of it, talk about what types of things you can spend HSA money on, and then bring it all together with a discussion of how we use an HSA within a plan. So Andrew, why don't you start out by giving an overview of what exactly an HSA is?
Sure. So in basic terms, an HSA is an account that you or your employer can contribute money to. And once the money is in the account, you can either use it to pay for out-of-pocket healthcare expenses, co-pays, deductibles, etc., or you can invest it and let it grow for the future, similar to a retirement account like a 403b or a Roth IRA. Now, as Trent mentioned, not everyone has access to an HSA. In order to have an HSA, you have to have a qualified high-deductible health insurance plan, and there's a specific definition for what dollar amount qualifies as a high-deductible plan. That amount is $1,500 for individual health insurance coverage or $3,000 for family coverage. Different health plans have different deductibles, so not every employer offers a high-deductible plan with an HSA, but some of them do. For example, of the big health systems in our local area, U of M doesn't offer any HSA-eligible health insurance plans, whereas Henry Ford, Trinity Health, and Corewell, or formerly Beaumont, they do. And generally speaking, if an employer offers several different health insurance options, the HSA plan will have somewhat lower premium costs, or the amount deducted from each paycheck, in exchange for having that higher deductible, or the amount that you have to pay out of pocket before your insurance kicks in and covers most of the costs. Many employers that offer a health insurance plan with an HSA also contribute money to the employee's HSA account each year, often something like $500 or $1,000. This employer contribution is quote-unquote free money for the employee, similar to a retirement match, and further reduces the cost of health insurance for the employee. Similar to retirement accounts like a 403b or Roth IRA, HSAs also have an annual contribution limit, so there's a limit to how much money can go into your HSA account each year. And the limit varies depending on whether you have individual health insurance coverage or family coverage. If you have an individual policy or individual coverage, the 2024 contribution limit will be $4,150, while the family contribution limit will be $8,300. Like other retirement accounts, there's also a catch-up contribution, so anyone age 55 and older can contribute an additional $1,000 per year beyond what I just mentioned. Again, similar to retirement accounts, the IRS periodically increases these contribution limits to keep up with inflation and the rising cost of living over time. For example, the increase in 2024 limits is especially large since inflation for HSAs has been so high. Another thing to keep in mind is that these contribution limits include both employer and employee contributions. So if your employer makes an annual contribution on your behalf, as many employers do, you're allowed to contribute the difference between the overall contribution limit and the amount your employer contributed to your account. Lastly, it's important to mention that HSAs, unlike healthcare flexible spending accounts, or FSAs, are not quote-unquote use it or lose it accounts. In other words, there's no concern of having to spend the money you contribute to an HSA by some set time period. If you have money in your HSA at the end of the year, it simply rolls over to the next year, growing tax-free and always available for future use. So you don't run the risk of forfeiting any money contributed to the account like you do with FSA accounts. This flexibility is really nice, and it's one of the many things that makes an HSA much more attractive than a healthcare flexible spending account. So that's a quick overview of an HSA and how it works, and now we'll switch gears and talk about the tax benefits of an HSA, which makes it a unique and very beneficial account to save to.
Yeah, the tax aspect of this account is huge, as an HSA is actually one of the only accounts out there that has a triple tax benefit. Specifically, when you contribute money to it, you receive a tax deduction for each dollar you contribute. If you then invest the money, it grows tax-free. Then in the future, when you withdraw the money to spend it, assuming it's used for qualifying expenses, it comes out tax-free as well. In addition to that, the tax deduction for HSA contributions is even more attractive than it is for pre-tax contributions to retirement accounts like a 403b, 401k, or 457b. With those retirement accounts, each dollar you contribute is exempt from state and federal income taxes. However, with an HSA, each dollar you contribute is not only exempt from state and federal income taxes, but it's also exempt from FICA taxes, Social Security and Medicare. So if you're a Michigan physician in the 32% federal tax bracket, each dollar you contribute to an HSA will save you almost 38 cents in combined taxes. To illustrate the dollars involved using the 2024 contribution limits, if you make the full $8,300 family contribution, you would save more than $3,000 in total taxes. So you'll receive a big tax deduction on the front end, and unlike pre-tax retirement accounts where you'll then pay taxes down the road when you withdraw the money, with an HSA, you'll withdraw that money tax-free for qualifying expenses. As we talked about many times in prior episodes, anytime you have a financial account with tax benefits, it allows you to stretch your dollars even further and accomplish more, and an HSA clearly allows you to do that. So the tax aspect is probably the most attractive feature of an HSA, but on top of that, you also have the ability to invest your HSA money to let it grow.
Yeah, exactly. And this almost feels like an infomercial of saying, but wait, there's more, which in this case, it's investing your contributions. And there are two components to how you can invest your contributions to an HSA. The first component is a quote unquote cash component, or a bare minimum that you are required to leave in cash before you can invest anything above that amount. Typically, there's a minimum requirement of $1,000 in cash, but anything above that $1,000 can be invested like you would with a retirement account, which is the second component. The list of investment options varies by HSA provider, but you usually have access to a variety of investment funds like ETFs and mutual funds, similar to how a 401k or 403b is set up. And given the tax benefits we mentioned earlier, you can invest any contributions over the $1,000 minimum, so you're able to put together an investment portfolio for another tax advantage account based on your goals and time horizon. And we'll talk about this in a bit when we share our thoughts on how we view and use HSAs, but oftentimes, if you're planning to invest the money, it's worth letting it grow over time and not using it until down the road in the future to amplify the tax-free growth of your investments. So if this is the case, your target investment allocation, in terms of the mix of stocks and bonds, will likely be similar or the same to your target investment allocation for your retirement goal. Knowing one of the triple tax benefits of an HSA is that your investments grow tax-free, you won't have to pay taxes on interests or dividends, worry about taxable capital gain distributions, or any quote-unquote realized capital gains by selling or rebalancing your investments. On top of that, you won't pay taxes when you withdraw the money in the future, assuming it's used for qualifying expenses. So in that sense, the tax treatment is similar to a Roth IRA, where once the money is in the account, you'll never have to pay taxes on it again. Again, assuming it's withdrawn for qualifying expenses. And I just mentioned that qualifying expenses caveat a couple times now, so we'll spend a minute discussing what exactly those are and also which one often surprises people.
Yeah, so what exactly are these qualifying expenses we're talking about? Well, some of them are obvious ones that you'd probably think about. For example, co-pays, deductibles, or co-insurance you have to pay related to your health insurance. Dental expenses, orthodontia, eye exams, and glasses or contacts, prescriptions, IVF, etc. These are all qualifying expenses. So these are many of the common health expenses that most people have to pay out of pocket. But in addition to these, there are some other covered HSA expenses that don't come into play until retirement, but can really add up in terms of their total cost. And one of the biggest ones is Medicare premiums. So as we touched on in a prior episode, episode number 25, Planning for Healthcare and Retirement, once you reach age 65, you become eligible for Medicare, and most people switch to that for their insurance. There are a few different parts to Medicare, but parts B and D require you to pay monthly premiums. These premiums are based on your income, but they start at around $165 a month for Part B. So for a married couple, at a minimum, you'll be paying $4,000 a year for Medicare premiums on top of your other healthcare costs. Fortunately, you're allowed to pay for Medicare premiums using HSA money. So this is a qualifying expense that allows you to withdraw from your HSA without paying taxes on the money. Also, keep in mind that even if your Medicare premiums are deducted from your monthly Social Security check, you can still pay for them using HSA money by simply withdrawing the money from your HSA account to reimburse yourself for the cost. Now, one thing worth mentioning is that one other common component of a retirement healthcare plan is a Medicare supplemental policy, also referred to as a Medigap policy, to pay for expenses that aren't covered by Medicare. And the monthly premiums for a supplemental policy are not HSA eligible, so it's just the Medicare premiums that we're talking about. So as you can see, there are a lot of different things you can pay for using HSA money, and knowing that anyone with an HSA will likely incur eligible expenses on an annual basis, the last thing we'll touch on is the strategy for how exactly to use your HSA dollars.
Yeah, and as Trent just mentioned, knowing how many different expenses are HSA eligible, and knowing that most of us will have these expenses each year, it might seem logical to simply use the money in your HSA to go ahead and pay for those costs. There's certainly nothing wrong with this approach because you're still paying for these healthcare costs using pre-tax money. However, this isn't the optimal financial approach and is why we don't typically recommend it. Assuming you're able to cover any out-of-pocket healthcare costs through cash flow, we actually prefer to leave the HSA money in place, invest it, and let it grow, thus stretching and maximizing the tax-free growth and future tax-free withdrawals. Now, the caveat here is that not everyone is able to cover all of their out-of-pocket healthcare costs through their cash flow. For example, you might have a procedure that results in you having to pay several thousands of dollars out of pocket between your deductible and coinsurance, and you might have to, or prefer to, pay for it with HSA money. So there are certainly different situations, but when you have the luxury of not needing to use your HSA money, it's nice to be able to let it grow. In an ideal world, we like to view an HSA as another retirement account within a financial plan, and specifically earmark it for covering healthcare expenses, i.e. another Roth bucket. For most people, healthcare costs tend to rise in retirement compared to while you were employed, so this is often an incremental retirement expense to consider. Knowing that it's an incremental expense, and a significant one throughout the course of retirement, it can be nice to have a bucket of money specifically earmarked for it, both from a financial planning standpoint, but also just general peace of mind. On top of that, as I mentioned when talking about investing HSA money, knowing that once it's in the account, it has Roth tax treatment, at least in terms of growing tax-free and not being taxed when withdrawn, and HSA is an extremely valuable space to think about when you're looking at your various tax advantage retirement accounts and wanting to stretch your dollars further. And another nice aspect of an HSA is that it's something you can take advantage of at any point in your career, assuming you're eligible for one. But as with anything in investing, the sooner you're able to start saving, the more you can benefit from the power of compounded interest over time. So if you're able to start contributing to an HSA relatively early in your career and invest the money for the long term, you can end up with another large bucket of tax advantage dollars by the time you get to retirement, which will help when putting together your retirement paycheck and funding your lifestyle. So that's our quote-unquote ideal scenario when it comes to an HSA, having it as another bucket of money that grows tax-free over time and can be withdrawn tax-free in retirement to pay for healthcare costs.
Well, hopefully this was a helpful rundown of an HSA as we head toward open enrollment and you're soon able to make your benefit elections for next year. It's an account that isn't always fully understood, so our goal was to give you some context around the nature, benefits, and strategy of it. As we mentioned, you wouldn't want to let the tail wag the dog and choose an HSA-eligible health plan solely for the HSA. But if that plan happens to make sense for your situation and you're able to participate in an HSA as an added benefit, that's great. As you can tell, we clearly love this account and see it as one of the most valuable tools to use as part of an overall financial plan. So to give a quick recap of some of the key points, number one, an HSA or health savings account is a financial account you're able to participate in if you have an HSA-eligible health insurance plan. You can contribute money yourself, and oftentimes your employer will make an annual contribution as well. Number two, an HSA is one of the few accounts that offers a triple tax benefit, where you receive a tax deduction for your contributions, can invest the money and let it grow tax-free, and can withdraw the money tax-free if used to pay for qualifying expenses. Number three, the investment component of an HSA works similar to retirement accounts like a 403b, 401k, or IRA, where you can invest the money in a variety of ETFs and mutual funds and let the money grow over time. Number four, qualifying HSA expenses include most of the typical out-of-pocket healthcare costs you would think of, copays, deductibles, coinsurance, dental, vision, etc., but also some costs you may not think about, including Medicare premiums in retirement. And lastly, number five, because of the tax benefits and flexibility of an HSA, assuming you're able to cover out-of-pocket healthcare costs from cash flow, we generally prefer to invest HSA money as another retirement account specifically earmarked for healthcare costs. Well, thank you as always to everyone for joining us for another episode of the show. You can find the show notes at the podcast page of our website, mdwmllc.com/podcast. We'll also include in there a link to our prior episode on planning for healthcare and retirement. Also, if you have thoughts to share or questions you'd like to have answered on the show, please don't hesitate to email us at info@mdwmllc.com. Take care, everyone, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Want even more ideas, tools, and resources on how to make smart financial decisions? Check out the resources section of MD Wealth Management's website at mdwmllc.com, where you'll find additional knowledge and insight from Michigan physicians, including a blog, ebook, and one-page guides. While there, you can also schedule a 15-minute conversation with Andrew and Trent to learn more about what it means to work with the firm and how they serve physicians. If you've enjoyed the content, please leave a review on iTunes and share with your friends and colleagues. Thanks so much for listening. Andrew Mushbaugh and Trent DeBruin are certified financial planners, principals, and co-founders of MD Wealth Management, a registered investment advisory firm in the state of Michigan. All opinions shared in the show are for general information and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations for any individual. All performance referenced is historical and no guarantee of future returns. Please consult with your legal advisor, your tax advisor, or your financial advisor before making any decisions.